Congrats on your new set of molds from Firebolt Dice. This video is just to walk you through kind of the care of your molds to make sure that they'll last as long as they possibly can, and to just give you some tips. Please, please, please be sure to read the safety information of your resin and wear gloves, always, and a respirator, and work in a well-ventilated area. So that hole at the top is called a sprue, and that's what you're going to pour your resin into. If you're doing something bigger, like an inclusion, you'll want to pry open the mold so that you can get more in there. These molds are made of a tougher silicone, which is both good and bad. It means they're harder to pry open, but they should also last longer. Sometimes molds can get tired, and the cuts that are there to help you remove the die after it's cast will start to sag open, and your resin will start to leak out of it. And you'll have to put like tape around the edges or something to prevent that. But since this silicone is firmer, there's a longer amount of time before that happens. Okay, after all your resin is poured, chuck them into a pressure pot or just wait. And you're going to want to wait for the magic time right here. So here you can see the die is cast, and I'm just going to gently pry it open a little bit and then grab the sprue corner and wiggle it out. And there we go. I have a die. And I'm going to do that with every single one. Just kind of release the suction by prying it open a little bit and then wiggling it out. You want them to be pretty hardened at this point so that wiggling them out doesn't deform their shape. D4s often take a little bit longer to harden since they're so small, and so you got to be careful when you pull them out or the corners can deform. Sometimes after I pull out my D4, I like to lay it on a flat surface so that it can solidify a little bit more. D12s are one of the harder ones to remove because their cuts aren't very big, so you might have to work a little harder to get your D12 out of the mold. Just grab firmly on that sprue and wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. Now, it's totally normal for your molds to go cloudy after a while. The heat from the resin will cause them to slowly cloud over. That's normal, and you can usually keep casting after that happens. Now, when you're prying open your molds, don't be too violent or they will tear. And then your molds might not work at all, or they might just require a bunch of extra cleanup. These are pretty stretchy, but if you're too violent with them, they will tear. So be careful. So now that they're out of the mold, you need to remove those sprues. I use these flush cutters. And what I do is I take off the top of the sprue, and then I'm going to lay the cutter flat against the face of the die and squeeze until I've removed that sprue. And then when it's off, you'll just be left with a little rough corner that needs to be sanded into shape and then polished. And you're going to do that with every single one of the dice. You want to be careful to do this while the resin is still a little soft. So that's why I said you're looking for that sweet spot where the resin is hard enough that you can pull it out without deforming it, but soft enough that you can cut off the sprues. Here's an example of a die that hardened that I cast weeks ago, so it's super, super hard right now. And the sprue is so hard to cut off that I'm having to use like all the strength of my hand. And you'll just want to pay attention to the specific kind of resin that you're using, and it's just going to take some experimentation to figure out when that sweet spot of time is. After you've cut off all the sprues, you've got a full set of dice ready for sanding, polishing, and inking. There are lots of great videos already available on the internet for sanding, polishing, and inking, so I won't be making any of those, but I will link some in the description of this video so that you can seek those out and start making some beautiful, beautiful dice. Good luck, makers!